All right, guys. So I'm going to go through one example of each of the type of questions that's on your review activity for this week. So if you look at the first equation, we need to find the vertex of this equation. So if you guys remember vertex form of a quadratic, remember that it's normally y equals y equals a x minus h squared plus k. And if you guys remember, the h and the k are what made the vertex up. So h and k is the vertex. So here, if we look at the 5 and the 4, remember the h is usually negative. So since this is a positive, it's going to be negative 5 and then positive 4. So if you want the vertex, that's all you have to do. Now, if you get stuck, remember that you can always look at the graph. So if you were to put this into Desmos and you graphed it, you would also find that the vertex would be at negative 5. Oops, I made a mistake actually, didn't I? That's negative 5, negative 4. Okay, so this stays the same, and this you always make opposite to get your vertex there. Okay? Now, next question. Now, each one of these questions is modeled almost the same as the questions that you guys have on your review activity. So now we have to solve this equation to find the zeros. So going back to what we kind of did during the school year almost even, is you have to solve this to find the zeros. So that means I need to factor, which means I'm going to do the t-chart. Now remember, you also have the quadratic formula that you could use. You have completing the square, which doesn't really help us too much in this case. And you also have graphing. But I'm going to do it by by factoring first. So remember, on the left side, we want to put what multiplies to give us 2x squared. So I'm going to say 2x and x. And then on the right side, we're going to play around with what is going to multiply to give me negative 12. Now, that can be a lot of different things. Let's start with 6 and 2. Now, since this is negative, I know one of them has to be negative. So I'm going to pick the negative 6. To check, I'm going to do my diagonals. So that's going to give me 4x. That's going to give me negative 6x, which is not going to get me negative 5. So I know that's wrong. All right, let's try something else. Let's try 4 and 3. All right, so that's going to get me 6x. Let's make this one negative. That's going to give me 6x and negative 4x, which also does not get me to 5x. So that doesn't work either. Now let's switch them. Let's try 3 and negative 4. That's going to give me 3x and negative 8x, which actually gets me negative 5x. So that works. So now I know when I write my answer, I write it this way. So I'm going to have 2x plus 3 and x minus 4. And then I know if I have to find the zeros, that I have to actually set those equal to 0. So 2x plus 3 equals 0, and x minus 4 equals 0. So this one's the easier one, so let's solve that first. So x is 4. And then over here, we're going to get x is negative 3/2. Okay, so remember, factoring will help us to find the zeros or the solutions. So remember your t-chart. Now, you can also use Desmos. Okay, when you use Desmos, you still get x is 4. Okay, so when you get x is 4, that's right here. And then negative 3/2, if you put that as a decimal, you get negative 1.5. That's the same exact thing. So it works. Okay, so your answers are going to be those two solutions. All right, next one. We need to solve the system of equations. So let's solve. Remember, we can do substitution, we can do graphing. You could do elimination here, but it's not really gonna get you too much. So I'm actually gonna do it by doing substitution. So I'm gonna take this and substitute it in there. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 2x minus 3. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to get this equal to 0. Okay, so when I do that, I'm left with x squared. That's going to give me minus 4x. Now, negative 3 and positive 3 actually cancels out.
Dude, just melted me.
Okay, so now on this question, actually, if I had a c value there, like I did here, I could just do my t-chart and factor, but I don't have the c value here. So all I'm going to do actually is I'm going to do the GCF. So if you guys remember back to this, I'm going to factor out an x from both of these. So when I factor out the x, I'm left with x minus 4. Okay, and then I have to set each thing equal to 0. So if I set that factor equal to 0, I'm actually done. And if I set this factor equal to 0 and solve it, I get x equals 4. Now we have to make sure that we go through and actually plug that back in to find the y values. So I'm going to plug it back into this one because it's a little bit easier. 2 times 0 minus 3, well, that's 0. So we plugged in 0 and we got out negative 3. There's your first solution. Now let's do the second one. So I need to plug 4 in. So I'm going to do 2 times 4 minus 3. Which equals 5. So I'm going to have the point 4 comma 5. So if I were to graph this in Desmos, I should get that same exact solution, which we did. We got 0, negative 3, and then 4, negative 5. Or sorry, 4, positive 5. All right, next one, find the inverse. So if you guys remember, for inverses, we have to, the first step is you want to switch x and y. So I'm going to say x equals 4y to the third minus 8. Once you switch the x and the y, then your next step is you want to get your y by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that 8. So I get x plus 8 equals 4y to the third. Now I still need to get rid of that 4 because the 4 is not being cubed. So the next thing that I actually want to do is get rid of that 4. So I'm going to divide by 4. Okay. And then the last thing that we want to do is get rid of that cubed. So then to get rid of the cubed, we are going to cube root. Okay. So those cancel out. So my final answer now, I'm left with y, which remember, instead of y, we're going to write f inverse. And we're going to say the cube root of x plus 8 over 4. That's going to be my inverse function. Okay. All right, next one, piecewise functions. So f of 4, I need to figure out, okay, I need to look at my domains here. Okay, remember, this piece I'm going to use when x is less than 4, and I'm going to use this piece when x is greater than or equal to 4. Okay, so 4 will fall into this because it's equal to. So I'm going to use this piece right here. So we're going to do negative 1/2 of 4 plus 5. So negative 1/2 of 4 is going to be negative 2. And then negative 2 plus 5 is 3. So f of 4 is going to be 3. Okay? All right, we got 3 more. Now, piecewise function, but looking at the graph now. So looking at the graph, I want to find f of negative 1. So that's telling me that x is negative 1. Okay, so if x is negative 1, that's going to be right here. And remember that we want to find the closed dot. So I hit this twice. I hit it right here and I hit it right here. But we want to find the one that has the closed dot, so that's this one right here. So the y value there is going to be negative 2. So f of negative 1 is going to be equal to negative 2. Okay? All right, next one, we got to solve this absolute value equation. So let's remember, the first thing I have to do is this thing right here, this absolute value I have to get by itself, which means I need to get rid of the 5 and I need to get rid of the 3. So let's get rid of the 5 first. So I'm left with 3 times the absolute value of x minus 4. That canceled out. And then 13 plus 5 is going to give me 18. Okay? Now I need to get rid of that 3 in the front. So that 3 is multiplying. So I'm going to divide. And I'm left with that. Now that the absolute value is all by itself, now I get to break it apart. So I can break this apart into x minus 4 equals 6 and x minus 4 equals negative 6. And then you just got to solve both of those. So all I need to do here is add 4 to both sides. So x equals 10. And then be careful, negative 6 plus 4 is going to be negative 2. So those should be my 2 solutions. Now, when I went to go graph this in my calculator in Desmos, what I actually did was you want to take this side right here and put it in the first line or in y1, and then just put y equals 13 in y2. Okay, so that goes in the first blank, and then y equals 13 goes in the second blank. And look at that, we got negative 2, oops, and 10 for the x values, which is what we got here, negative 2 and 10. Okay. All right, last one. We have to solve this absolute value inequality. So again, I need to get this by itself first. So the first thing that I'm actually going to do here is I want to get rid of this 3 because the 2 is actually multiplying. So I want to subtract 3 first. So that leaves me with negative 2 x plus 5 is greater than negative 6. Now I know when there's a negative on the right side, we get a little bit alarmed sometimes, but we can't get alarmed yet because I got to get rid of that negative 2 first. So divide by negative 2. Now if I divide by a negative, remember we have to flip that sign, which makes it a less than sign. And then now it's going to become a positive 3 because those negatives cancel out. So now that it's a less than sign, remember less than means that I have to do the compound inequality. So if I'm going to do the compound inequality, I'm going to take this 3, put it over here, make it a negative 3. My sign's going to stay as a less than. Okay, and we just kind of reflect everything over to the left-hand side. So let's solve this for x now. All I have to do is subtract 5, but I got to subtract it from all of the sides now. So I'm left with negative 8 is less than x, which is less than 3 minus 5 is going to be negative 2. Okay. So if I were to go and graph this, I would say, all right, -8, -7, -6, -5, -4, -3, -2. They would both be open circles because they're not equal to. And since it's a compound inequality, I know it's going to be everything in between. Okay? So that is how you do each one of the questions in your review activity for this week. So watch this video back. Okay, I'll do a real quick slide through each of them again. You need to know how to find the vertex from a quadratic equation. You need to be able to find the zeros by factoring using your T-chart. You need to be able to solve the system of equations that's quadratic and linear, so set them equal to each other and factor. You need to be able to find the inverse of an equation, so switching x and y and then solving it. Piecewise equations, you need to know which piece are you going to plug it into. So look at your domains over here. Okay, look at your domains, find the right piece and plug it in. Same thing for graphs. Find the right piece to use and take that value. Solving the absolute value equation, so get the absolute value signed by itself first and solve. And then same thing for inequalities. Remember, if you have a less than symbol, less than symbol makes you do the compound. And if you had a greater than symbol, that's when you break it apart. Okay? And remember on this one, when we divided by the negative, the sign flipped. So that's what made it the compound inequality, because the sign flipped while we were solving. Okay? So as you guys are going through the review